And so here we have our very first step in overcoming fear. The first step is acknowledging that the fear is there. Simply acknowledging the fear exists. David arrives on the battlefield, sees the fear sweeping through. He goes, oh, I see what's happening. This dude Goliath is causing everyone to be scared. We probably won't face a giant in hand-to-hand combat. And I say probably because, we live in some pretty crazy times right now. But we probably won't, but that doesn't mean that the fears we face aren't giants to us. Because the fears we face are so big that sometimes that's all we can see, that's all we can think about. And we've first got to acknowledge that that fear is actually there. And it's going to take on different forms. Sometimes you kind of get that pit in your stomach when you're like, I really should tell the truth, or I need to confess something, or you're kind of hiding something, whether it's reporting to your boss or sharing something with your spouse. You're like, that pit, that feeling, that's fear, right? That's probably some embarrassment. You don't want to share it, or you don't want to experience rejection, and you don't want to experience the consequence. So there's some fear there. Hey, we got to acknowledge that there's another battle going on here. There's fear involved. Or sometimes you're like, I'm in this situation, and I probably should talk about my faith, but I don't want to, or I should stand up, but I don't really want to. And I was on the plane last week, 6 hours, right? And early on in the plane, it's me, and there's this couple next to me, and they're like, hey, can we borrow your pen? And I said, sure. And I hand them a Church on the Ridge pen, which is not stealing. It's called marketing. Right? If you want to take your Church on the Ridge pen home with you, feel free. But when I handed him that pen, I thought, because he goes, is this your church? And I was like, well, this could go one of two ways, probably, right? And now we're stuck together for like another 3 hours. But there's that little something that comes up, and you're like, I don't know. Let's address it, right? And it's important to be able to acknowledge these fears, because if we don't, then most likely what we'll do is just go into autopilot and react to this emotion, and this emotion will actually begin driving what we do. But if we can stop and acknowledge, hey, I'm facing something here, I'm facing a fear here, now I can proactively take steps to overcome it, the things we're talking about today. But if we never acknowledge it, we'll just roll right into autopilot. So step one, acknowledge your fears. Back to our story. This is what David has done. He identifies the fear. Kind of an easy one. It's Goliath. Verse 27, they repeated to him what they had been saying, and they told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Sometimes, even those closest to us can cause an element of fear. Sometimes it can even come from family. You're like, there's my family. They're going to judge. They're going to criticize me again, right? It doesn't have to just be from a giant. It could be from your own family. Verse 29, now what have I done, said David. Can I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the man answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul. So Saul sent to see him. And David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able to fight this Philistine. You're only a young man. He's been a warrior from his youth. David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came, I carried off a sheep from the flock. I went after it, I struck it, I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its ear, I struck it, I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Here's the second key to overcoming our fear. Making decisions based on faith, not feeling. Right? David looks at his situation and goes, wait a second. God was with me when the lion came. Wait a second. God was with me when the bear came. Why wouldn't God be with me now when this Philistine is here? Right? These feelings of fear are real. Yeah, fact. Goliath is giant. Like, fact. He is an amazing, mighty warrior, right? All these things are true. But that doesn't mean God's not with him anymore. And so here he makes this statement to Saul, the king. He goes, man, God has been with me. He will continue to be with me. That's the decision. I will go fight him. I'm not going to let fear drive this decision. And over again, we see in the Bible this phrase of, fear not, I am with you. God says this to reassure his people. Fear not, I am with you. In fact, that phrase has been spoken over 365 times in the Bible. Maybe not that exact phrase, but that sentiment. Fear not, I am with you. Joshua, when he's leading Israel into the promised land, God gives him a little prep talk and he says, hey, you're about to go in, be strong, be courageous. Why? Because I'm with you. Right? Mary, the mother of Jesus, hey, you're going to have a baby, but fear not, I am with you. Right? Jesus and his disciples, he's like, hey, come into my end. I'm going back up to heaven. It's now yours to bring this religion, this faith, this relationship into the world. It's a big task. But fear not. Surely I will be with you. Paul, one of the greatest missionaries who wrote a lot of the New Testament, he's speaking in Acts 18, and God says, hey, don't stop speaking. Don't be quiet. I'm with you. And so we have this fear not, I am with you, over and over again. Faith is the antidote to fear. And sometimes a visualization helps. Like, actually picture God. Like, God is with me. I'm nervous to speak today in front of people, and okay, maybe I got a picture. I literally dreamed about this last night. I was dreaming that I came up and it was like a food court, right? And everyone's just like doing their own thing, and I couldn't follow my notes, and I was like, it was terrible. I woke up and I had this picture in my mind. I go, no, wait a second. God will be there with me. He'll be on stage with me as I'm speaking. Like, get that picture in your mind. Like, when I go to this meeting, like, God's going into the meeting with me. When I'm with my family, maybe a family reunion, Thanksgiving's coming up, right? It's like, no, I don't have to worry. God's going to be with me at that dinner table. And if you think about making decisions, there's a lot of factors that go into making a decision. If fear is one of the factors in that decision-making process, you're probably moving in the wrong direction. And so my encouragement is, hey, let's take that fear factor and replace it with a faith factor. And that's what David's doing here. Fear not, God is with me. I'm going to fight Goliath. And so we keep moving on in the story. Saul said to David, all right, go, and the Lord be with you. Perfect, that's the word he needed, right? Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet. David fastened on his sword over the tunic, and he tried walking around, but he was not used to them. I can't go in these, he said to Saul. I'm not used to them. So he took them off. He took his staff in his hand, and he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. He put them in a pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, and he saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, my dog, you come at me with sticks? Then the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said. I'll give your flesh to the birds and the animal. So this next response from David is actually our third strategy in overcoming fear. Sometimes you have to speak to your fear. In David's case, Goliath is right in front of him. He's literally speaking to Goliath. Sometimes for us, though, we're going to have to speak to the fear. Even though there's not a physical Goliath in front of us, we can still out loud speak to the fear that we're experiencing. So here's what David says. He says, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I'll strike you down, I'll cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds, the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give it all into our hands. Come on, David. It's like, take that, Goliath, right? He probably said it like with a lot more attitude than I just said. And sometimes I think when you're vocalizing these truths, you maybe say it with a little bit of attitude, hey, fear, guess what I got for you? But number 3 is speaking to your fears. And my gut says this. Yes, David was talking to Goliath, but I have a feeling he was talking to his own soul just as much, maybe even more, than he was actually talking to Goliath. It's like, hey, I need to talk myself into this because this is getting real, and he's coming. And that's okay, right? Sometimes the action that we decided on, the decision we made with the faith factor that we're moving ahead isn't lining up with our feelings. And we need to speak to that. David declares, the battle is the Lord's. For us, the application is what are the declarations that we need to make with the fears that we face, right? These declarations should remind us of the faith factor, right? And it's such a healthy practice to have in your life because typically when fear starts to come in, it muddles your mind, and it's all you can think about, and it's all you can really focus on. And you actually have to say, stop, I'm not going to think about this. And you have to begin verbalizing some of these truth statements. And you have to lead your own thought pattern with your voice. And so you speak these fears out. The strategy is this, like, okay, here's the fear, here's the declaration. I need to memorize this and then recite it as many times as I need to. And I need to keep reciting until my mind starts to listen to me. I'm just going to keep on reciting that truth. And so for me, there's 3 declarations that have been really helpful for me. I'm going to share them with you. They're public, though, so you can use them as well. I don't have a coin on them. In fact, the first one is written by David himself in Psalm 56. He says, when I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? So if I'm at a gathering of neighbors and a party, right? And I start wanting to pretend like I'm someone I'm not, or I'm getting embarrassed about. It's like, wait a second, what can mere mortals do to me? Wait a second, come on. What can these mere mortals do to me? I live for God. Galatians 1:10. This is my 3rd one. I'm going to skip number 2. I'll come back to it. Hey, if I'm trying to please people, I wouldn't be a follower of Jesus. Come on, Kevin. Who are you trying to impress right now? Right? 2 good declarations. And the other one is when I start stressing out or I start worrying about things. Philippians 4:6 and 7 says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, right? The peace of God, which does not make sense, will guard your heart and your mind. And so I start worrying, I start getting worked up about something. I go, no. I present my request to God with thanksgiving. And then, Lord, help me to experience your peace. Lord, let your peace guard my heart and mind. And you speak these to your fears that you're facing. My application is figure out what your declarations are. You can use some of mine. There's lots of good ones in the Bible. I highly recommend a lot of them. Memorize them, though, and begin reciting them. David made that declaration. Hey, this battle is the Lord's. Back to the story in verse 48. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, he took out a stone, he slung it, struck the Philistine in the forehead. the stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. The imagery there for me, I was like, there's not like a bunch of squishy tissue on my forehead for a stone to sink in, right? It's like, must have hit him pretty good. And so David triumphed over the Philistine. He triumphed over his fear. With a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and he killed him. Man, what a great story. And here's the principle I want to end the day with. Is this fourth principle isn't really written in this chapter, but it's learning from our fears. Learning from our fears. Because if you continue to read out the story of David, you're going to see time and time again this lesson that David learned, that it doesn't matter how many people are coming against me. Conventional weapons and warfare is not necessarily the answer. The courage and faith that I have in my God is the answer. And so you're going to go on to see, if you read about David, these battles and these victories that he has, these amazing victories in, and he always gives credit back to God. It's this lesson that he learned as a young boy, as a young man, that's going to carry him in as a king. And he's going to be called a man after God's own heart. And we can learn from our fears, right? Sometimes we do overcome them. We go, whoa, that worked. I'm going to do that again. Sometimes we don't overcome them. We go, what just happened? And you have to step back and go, hey, if I'm going to face this again, how can I work through this?